Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Autonomy Pods, and today we've got me on my own, and maybe Teddy if he comes and joins us because he's down here, and we're going to talk about how interested are you versus how committed are you. Now, big question most people get, like whether it's on prospective calls with clients or game plan calls or people that I've got friends and family who kind of are interested about the coaching, is that they're always asking like, how committed do I need to be? Or like, I'm not that committed. Or equally, why am I not doing the things that I should be doing? And I think it comes down to a few pieces of the puzzle, but I just want to explain what the difference is between interested and committed are. And generally it comes down to one key variable. So like, some people can start a diet and they like the idea of dieting. It sounds great that they're going to be dropping a dress size, or they're going to be losing some weight, or feeling better about themselves. But what's the difference between that person and then the person that actually does it? There's a plethora of obviously psychological traits that go with this, but the biggest thing when you look at interested versus committed is the level of pain associated with the current place they're in. Like, we always have this saying with autonomy, it's like, it's really difficult to help people just lose 2 kilos. It's so much easier to help people lose 10 kilos. But why? Because the pain of being 10 kilos overweight, to not fitting in your dresses, to not fitting in your shirts, to being really sluggish all the time, is generally more of a motivator than just losing 2 kilos. It'd be nice to lose 2 kilos. It's like, it would be nice. But that person who's trying to lose 10 kilos, it's necessary. And they feel it's necessary also. So when you're breaking down those barriers of like interested versus committed, you're looking at the level of pain associated with it. So you're looking at, how much do I need to make this change? Why am I desired to do so? What if I don't do those things? There's Millie. If you say hello, Millie.
Hello. I'm looking for my card. I can't find it.
Looking for your card?
My bank card. I've lost it.
Oh, convenient. She probably wants mine then.
Oh, we got it.
Oh, you got it. Oh, look at all the dust in that wallet. When you're looking at interested versus committed, there is literally one big problem, which is the pain associated with where they're at right now. If you're trying to lose just 1 to 2 kilos, you're probably not too discontent with the position you're in, and there's no real drive to do so. You could do it, you could take it or leave it, but then most of the time those people just get carried away with the thing that's most important at that present moment in time, which is not restriction. It's not saying no to things, it's always saying yes to things. They'd rather have the 2 dinners out at the weekend than say no to their friends for a short space of time, because that 2 kilos doesn't mean that much. But then I'll cover how you can get the most out of it if you just want to lose 2 to 3 kilos. But the reality is in those moments, the people that are losing 10 kilos or 15 kilos or have a high degree of pain with where they're at right now, it's like, I need to make this change. I need to say no. I need to do this because of how I feel, how I look, what I can't fit into, where I'm going in 10 weeks. I need to get those changes done. And that type of pain is ultimately the committer. It allows you to commit to it because of the benefit that you're going to receive and the need and the must to do so. Now, most people have a desire within them if it's created. Stepping on the scales and seeing that number go above 100 kilos, or not fitting into that size 8 anymore and having to try on a 10 or a 12 before you go to that wedding. They can obviously be those big triggers. And they just generally trickle down into being committed, and then you make those changes because you remind yourself of where you're going to, why it's a benefit, and why you're moving forwards. However, if you haven't had that moment yet, but you're still wanting to move forwards, we need to talk about how you can go from interested to committed. And the easiest way to do that is not a physical thing. It's never physical. It's not what you do, how you do it. It's why you do it. So it's looking at, why is this important to me right now? And actually like having some psychological warfare with yourself, because like some days I don't particularly feel like working 12 hours on the business, or I feel like I don't really want to do these 2-3 tasks. Maybe it's a year ago it was record this podcast, but why do I have to do it? What happens if I don't record this podcast? Well, you don't get the knowledge and information about how to turn yourself from interested to committed. You don't get to have that information, that burst of motivation that I can give you from watching this podcast or listening to it. The cost to me of that is high because I want you to have the information. I want you to have what exactly I'm giving you. And that's how you make yourself from interested to committed, because you write down the things of where you are right now, the pros versus the cons. Now, this can be really hard to do, but when you get it and when you get to grips with it and you write down, what are the pros of being X amount of kilos, 80 kilos, 90 kilos, wherever you are right now, write down that number and go, why am I happy being here? What is the pros versus the cons? And then write down next to it the goal that you have. What are the pros versus the cons? And then on paper, unemotionally, in your brain, because your brain can have like 6,000 thoughts on a day-to-day basis, you can get sidetracked, and they're not all particularly true. That's how phobias, and we believe the situations to be worse than they actually are. But like, if you write down on a piece of paper what is true and false from a pros and cons perspective, you'll see the benefit of being over there versus where you're at right now. And that can be the difference between you becoming interested and committed. And once you are committed, you'll have waves of being interested and not committed, and that way you'll have to kind of go back to that list and revisit why it's important to be there. That's the key fundamental when it comes to being interested versus committed. And obviously there's a massive psychological variable that goes into this when you're looking at how does that translate into a diet, how does that translate into what happens in week 4, week 6, week 12, week 16, week 20, when 25, 55, if you're trying to drop 50 kilos like our good friend Prakash, is that the committed people have to do the thing that they're doing, and that means that you're then consistent against short-term pain, because that's what you're fighting against short-term pleasure. You're fighting against, wouldn't it be nice to, or my friends are doing this, or I don't feel like doing. That's what you're fighting against when you're committed versus interested, because the interested people can be interested for a short space of time before something better comes along, and that better thing is normally not conducive to you dropping those 2 dress sizes or that dress size. And when you can fight against short-term pleasure for long-term pain and flip that and have short-term pain for long-term pleasure, you become a very, very, very formidable dieter. You can't be stopped. That's the window cleaners outside, so apologies for that. I would show you, but I'm not going to ruin the podcast. But if you turn short-term pleasures into something you don't do because you're committed to the longer process, then you're going to then last and weather the storm. Because this fat loss thing, this losing 10 kilos, 5 kilos, if you do it the right way, and if you do it in a moderate fashion where you're not like giving up this South Asian food, you're not like going and doing 20,000 steps, you're not doing 700 calories a day, whatever it is, you're not going to do it in a week. You're not going to do it in 2 weeks. And equally, the whole thing of maintenance after a diet isn't going to be a 2-week thing either. So you need to convert interest to commitment and weather the storm of those short-term pleasures for long-term, success. Because this goal of what you're trying to do, whether it's the diet, reduce yo-yo dieting, or stay in shape forever, it's a 6-month plus thing. It's like, even if you lose 3 to 4 kilos, it's not just 3 to 4 weeks of a diet, it's how about 6 months afterwards where you're learning to keep those 4 kilos off. And in order to last 3, 6, 9 months on anything and make this a lifestyle, it needs to be practiced. It needs to be a longer form thing. You can't create a lifestyle out of this new thing if you're only prepared to do it for 4 weeks until other things come along. So that's why interested committed is such an interesting topic, is because the interested ones may lose the weight, but they become yo-yo dieters because something better comes along. They may not even lose the weight at all because that weekend looks so appealing compared to what it would look like if you're trying to diet, because there's always some sacrifice. Like, we can make the diet as easy as possible for our client base, but it doesn't mean that they have to not do anything. Where they're at right now is 100 kilos habits. If you're 100 kilos, you've got 100 kilo habits. To be 80 kilos, you have to have 80 kilo habits. And that's different than what you're doing right now. It might not be giving up anything. You can still have sandwiches, you can still have pani puri, whatever, but you're still not going to be able to have the amount that you had previously. So there's always a sacrifice. There's always a cost in doing anything. There's never not. So you always have to be committed to something, even if it's not like rigid. So once you've done that level of like understanding around interested versus committed, you wrote it down, pros and cons of the situations, then it's about creating evidence. You will not become committed if you're just interested without evidence to prove to yourself that you're committed. Most people are like, I don't have the discipline for it. I don't have the commitment for it. I don't have the motivation for it. I don't have the consistency for it. I don't have the ability to say no for this diet. But they all come and change through evidence. If I every single day for 365 days drank water, I would become a water drinker. That's such a shit example. But if every day for 365 days I became, let's say for example, if I meditated, I'd become a meditator. I would meditate daily. You get the drift. If you do something and practice it enough, you do become that thing. And I think that's what most people need to remember when they're interested. They don't see the process behind it. They don't see why and how and what they should do for that extended period of time. And whatever you generally suck at when you're interested or even committed needs to be practiced. Like, you don't get born disciplined. And there's so many podcasts coming out now. There's so many examples of, you see why people are successful more now than ever, right? You can see on Instagram, the cars, the flashy stuff. You can see people running businesses, $100 million businesses, and trillionaires. You can see them on enough podcasts and see them enough audios, and have enough interviews with them, have asked the questions of why they're successful. And most people are not born with it. But most people who get it easier have a deep desire due to their upbringing that create that. So, for example, like most single parent homes in the US, from an African American standpoint, there is a lot, like from a percentage of basketball players that make it to the NBA, a high percentage of basketball players that make it from the NBA are single home parents. the drive, the desire of them making it and being successful, and like the hustle and the behind it, doesn't come from pleasure. It doesn't come from having a lovely childhood. It comes from the pain of what was brought up with in those environments, in those scenarios, in those areas of town, in those relationships that they had. It didn't come from lovely stuff. No one ever gets massively far initially from love. They get everywhere from pain. And that's where, when you're looking at interested, committed versus that whole analogy of the basketball thing, is like, not many people have developed those disciplinarians, those motivators, unless they're subconsciously rooted in negative behaviors that have happened previously. If you're like that and you've never had a subconscious desire to improve your health and fitness, you need to create it. You might have had something different. You might have had like a upbringing where you were forced to, or thought that you were forced to go down the university route and get a job as a dentist or a lawyer or something in that facet, as most of our South Asian clients tell us about the kind of positive versus negative upbringing that they got towards like having a career. You might be motivated by that. But at the same time, is when you look at your diet, when you look at your nutrition, when you look at your training, if you don't have a burning deep desire to do so, or an subconscious or a negative experience that's happened in the past that is now driving you forwards, you have to create these new things, because you didn't wake up with your motivation. You didn't wake up with a burning desire to be successful. You didn't pop out the womb thinking, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or I'm going to go and get absolutely shredded. It was developed through childhood, through negative experiences. But then if you don't have any of those in this particular area in nutrition, training, exercise, then you have to develop those particular traits through working on them over time. So if you don't have a deep desire, burning nature to be at the gym every day, every morning, because it's absolutely essential, I have to do because I've had such a negative this and this, you have to prove to yourself that you can do it through evidence. And that's the whole roundabout way to say that if you haven't got it deep down and you haven't got a burning desire to do these things, and you find it difficult to do motivation, discipline, say no, you have to practice it, because without the practice, you're just interested, and it would be nice to have, or I should do that. Should be erased from the dictionary. Should is like a word which means that based on other people's opinion, based on the situation I might want to be in, I should go and do that. No one ever does anything when they say should. It's just a throwaway term. I will, I am, and I don't are the words that we should be using, as opposed to I should. If you say I should go to the gym, you don't actually want to go. Just FYI. So I think once you then look at the evidence side of things and you look at how to create commitment, is that you have to start with evidence before you get committed. So if you have an evidence of 6 days that you did this one certain thing, and by the way, in therapy they utilize this all the time. It's like, if they ever want to show you that you are interested, if therapists ever want to show you that you are the thing that you're saying you're not, they will go into a different area of your life and ask you about certain things that show you are that thing. So for example, like if someone says, oh, I can't be consistent, then a therapist will say, hey, okay, so how many days of work have you had off in the last 30 days? And then you might say none. They'll go, oh, so you're consistent with work, right? And then you're like, yeah. And then they go, oh, so you are consistent with work. So you are a consistent person, just not in this area. Oh, okay. Yeah, I am consistent in work. I'm just not consistent with nutrition. So it's like, you are a consistent person. You're just not practiced it enough to be in this area of your life. And the motivators aren't the same. So you have to pull that evidence and start with something to then get the thing that you want. If you want to be motivated, you have to practice motivation. You have to practice going to the gym, going to do your nutrition. You have to practice getting up when you don't want to. You have to practice that willingness to do the next thing. And that comes with evidence of day to day, in and out, practicing, repeating, failing, repeating, failing, repeating, being more consistent, failing, repeating, until you become that particular thing and you don't even think about it then. Most people that are consistent don't forget they're consistent because it's just a thing that they do. Most people that are motivated don't know they're motivated, they just do the thing that they're supposed to do. Those that are disciplined don't feel like they're disciplined, they're just doing the thing that they need to do. And that's also really important to note. So create enough evidence in the area that you want to be committed to that particular thing. And it starts with the evidence, finishes with the end result. And by the time you get to the end result, you're already that thing anyway. So you won't even think about it. So it's going to be a short podcast because I know I waffle a lot, but you want to look now at the element of that. It's like, if you've been struggling with your diet over the last 3 to 4 weeks, are you interested in becoming that thing, or are you committed to being that new thing? Like, how important really is it to you? And once you go back and do the pros and cons list of like where you want to be, pros and cons, where you are right now, pros and cons, and you realize that that pain of where you are right now is significantly more than probably what you thought it was, then you can use that pain to then practice the thing that you need to do to get better. So if you've got a diet plan, if you've got a nutrition plan, if you've got an amount of steps to hit on a day-to-day basis, if you've got a training routine, you can then put that energy, that pain, into practicing those things to get the result that you want, which inevitably makes you committed. I hope that makes sense. Like, subscribe, comment. If that just is me chatting shit, let me know. If you like what I'm saying, let me know, and meet you in the next one.